Hello, my name is Christopher Innocenti, and this is the first episode of Uncharted History. This channel will investigate and discuss military engagements that are often overshadowed, rarely discussed, or in some cases completely unknown to our wider audiences. Today, I would like to journey back to October 28, 1940, the Italian invasion of Greece. The 3rd Alpini Division Julia was mobilized to Albania and spearheaded the invasion towards the Pindus mountain range and found themselves quickly cut off and surrounded by 3 Greek divisions as the Italian lines collapsed around them. Managing to break through the encirclement at the Prati bridgehead, they then endured constant attack as they retrograded down the Viosi River valley. Finally, the Julia found themselves holding what remained of the Italian lines on Mount Chiarista, and they acted as an anvil, holding firm until reinforcements could arrive. Reinforcements that came far too late. After 92 days of near constant fighting and withstanding countless assaults and counterattacks along the Klysura Pass, what remained of the 3rd Julia Division were finally withdrawn on January 26, 1941. When all was said and done, the division was completely destroyed. There's a famous saying in Italy, the lemon was squeezed of its last drop. This is the death of the Julia Division. The first time. That's more like it. Today we're going to talk about the Italian Alpini. Defined Alpini is Alpine divisions, Italy's elite mountain warfare soldiers. They are today still around, and they are the oldest active troops designed specifically for mountain warfare in the world. Now when you look at Italy's geography, it makes sense. The entire northern border of Italy is very mountainous terrain, which makes a natural defense, militarily speaking. The most notable borders where military actions occurred were between Italy and France, as well as Italy and Austro-Hungarian Empire, what is today Slovenia. This is part of the reason why Italy got involved in World War I, was because they did not like the fact that the Austro-Hungarians controlled the peaks in the mountainous area looking down on Venice. So, that being said, Italy designed troops specifically for mountain warfare, and they were called the Alpini. So now let's talk a little bit about the Alpini uniforms, equipment, things that would set them apart, maybe give them a little bit of a higher chance in terms of mountain warfare, where a lot of the regular infantry lacked. So for one thing, they had pretty good winter weather equipment. They had supplies of gloves, they're called toques or balaclavas, things that would cover your face. This hat is the traditional Alpini cap. This is a hat that they still wear today with minor variations. Snow goggles, if you're part of a ski battalion. A lot of Alpini did have skis or ski attachments for cross-country skiing or reconnaissance, even downhill attacks. They did practice with throwing grenades while skiing. You'll notice that they have specialized boots, such as these here, with the strap that goes across. Vibram soles as well. That was very new for the time. A lot of boots would either have hobnails or nothing, such as these. This would be like a regular infantry boot. However, these are really good for mountainous terrain. The strap allows them to strap into skis, so they can just pop their skis on the ground, strap in, and be on their merry way. This cape here that I'm flaunting, very fashionably. It's essentially a greatcoat, but it was a good way to save on supplies. So instead of having to reproduce a bunch of overcoats for various soldiers, you could just cut a circle of fabric kind of like this, and it doesn't have to really put much industry or effort into it. And a lot of Alpini liked it. It was very unique for them. Very unique design choice, and it's actually really warm. The rifles, the standard infantry rifle, and actually a lot of regular Alpini did have this as well, is the M9141 Carcano rifle, the long rifle. But if you are a member of the ski battalions, you would use a cavalry carbine. Now, the reason for this is because it's smaller, it's lightweight. I mean, this is probably only about 6 pounds. And the idea is you could use it while you're skiing. You're quicker with it, and you could shoot one-handed if you really needed to. So that's kind of the theory behind it, but that's a distinction between the regular infantry and Alpini for the most part.
So now let's talk about the Italian invasion into Greece and why it failed ultimately. This is a map of Greek dispositions on October 28th, 1940, and as you can see, between the border, they amassed their forces, the Greeks did, they amassed their forces heavily in Macedonia. Now, the Italian plan did not put a lot of thought into this. They did not find the Pindus Mountains, which separated Macedonia and Ionia. They didn't really put a whole lot of thought into it. They kind of disregarded it and did not figure it into their plans. So what they ended up doing was strangling themselves into this causeway here. The problem is, the Greeks, recognizing that the Pindus Mountains were essential for staging attacks on the Italian flanks, started to push out into the mountains and control the high ground, and they now secured the entire flank. Additionally, the plan assumed several things. One of the assumptions was that the Greeks were not preparing their forces whatsoever. They thought it would be a surprise attack, and the Greeks were well aware of Italian movements in Albania. The second was the Italians hoped and invited the Bulgarians, which is up here in this red area, would join in and tie up the Greek forces. They declined their offer, however, so all of these forces that were guarding the Bulgarian front could be shifted over to assist in the Italian offensive. So what happened was the initial overall ratio between Italian and Greek forces was 119 Italian battalions against 162 Greek ones. And as time went on, the Greeks got stronger and stronger as more of these forces started to move west, and the Italians increasingly found themselves in retreat. It created a domino effect, and they began to falter almost immediately.
The 3rd Alpine Julia Division, named after the Julian Alps in northeast Italy, was also involved in the invasion of Greece and fought very valiantly. There's actually a scene in the movie Captain Corelli's Mandolin with Nicolas Cage, kind of a hilarious portrayal of Italian soldiers, but nonetheless, decent job on the uniforms and whatnot. But there's a scene where a soldier walks up and he was transferred to their unit, and they say, "You were in the Julia Division?" And everybody's just kind of quiet. Nobody really says anything, like they're in shock and awe.
Carlo Guercio, reporting for duty, sir.
Carlo, where have you served?
Albania.
Albania? None of us have seen any action yet.
I was with the Julia Division.
Then you have fought enough for all of us.
But they never expand on that. They never really investigate that. Like, what does that mean? What happened to the Julia Division? Well, one of the books that I recently read
is memoirs from Major Giacomo Fatuzzo, translated by his daughter, called The Death of the Giulia Division. Not surprisingly, the division was annihilated. On paper, when you say that a division is annihilated, it means it loses full combat strength. You have an unacceptable level of casualties. To give an idea of the type of terrain that the Alpini found themselves fighting in, this is a picture of Mount Smolicus. It is the second highest peak in Greece next to Mount Olympus at 2,637 meters. This is the furthest point that the 3rd Julia Division reached before finding themselves surrounded and forced to retrograde down the Vjosi River Valley. Now, Fatuzzo describes a lot of the engagement, especially around Mount Smolicus, and he gives altitudes. So you'll often see him reference that they were at a point of 2,300 meters altitude, so near the top, and then the Greeks would be down at like 600 meters, something like that. Now, looking at a picture like this, you can really see how difficult terrain it is to traverse and why it's important to have specialized troops in mountain warfare. The Alpini very effectively used the narrow valleys in between the Pindus Mountains as saddles or kill zones. So they would lure the Greeks into these saddles, and then they would open fire from all sides. The Julia Division began their retreat down the Vjosi River Valley, which was at the foot of the Pindus Mountains. This is the quickest way back to Albania, and additionally, the Prati bridgehead was the only route of supply for the army, another reason why the attack failed. Unfortunately for the Julia Division, when they reached the Prati bridge, they faced a fully reinforced Greek defense that barred their entrance into Albania. The Alpini do manage to break through, however, there is a high death toll at the Prati bridge. 2 officers from the 143rd are missing. 12 Alpini are dead, 50 are injured, and 84 are missing. At this point, the Aquila Battalion has lost 1/3 of its men. The Italian military's role in the Second World War is one of the most misunderstood nations, in my opinion. They've become sort of a rolling meme for incompetence, and for good reason. There were a lot of issues of them not performing as well as many of the other major nations of the Second World War. However, there's also a lot of myths that I would like to dispel. Certainly, their leadership was very problematic. Their industry was nowhere near, not even a fraction to what some of their opponents like Great Britain and the United States, of course, and France as well, to some extent. But their technological disadvantages, certainly, I would actually argue that the Italians were well aware of their technological disadvantage, and they often still went into battle with these disadvantages. Their light machine gun, the Breda 30, they actually had a nickname for it, Judas, which, if you're familiar with Christian biblical lore, Judas is the one who betrayed Jesus Christ. So they were well aware that their technology was not up to current modernization, if you will. And their tanks, M1340s, were vastly inferior to the Lend-Lease tanks and the Matildas and Churchills and whatnot that they were facing in Africa. So there's a lot to be said for somebody going into their tin can, right, or staying on the lines. You have no water, you have no supplies, you don't have guns that can take out enemy tanks, things like that, and you're still there, and you're doing your best, and you're throwing Molotov cocktails at them and whatnot. So I think that's definitely something to point out. But just like any army of the Second World War, there are events and there are things that we can talk about and we can recognize, hey, these guys did the best that they could with the situation that they were in. And we see various instances of this on the Greek front. Now, one of the things that Italy did really well, and this has been corroborated by Allied testimonies, and it, one thing that the Italians were certainly considered themselves more than proficient in fact, one of the best in the world, is Italian artillery. Alpini artillery is of particular significance. The 9th Alpini Regiment L'Aquila Battalion, which was under Fatuzzo's command, was attached to the 3rd Alpine Artillery Regiment Udine Artillery Group, and Fatuzzo praises them on numerous occasions. The Udine Artillery Group was equipped with Obice da 75/18 Modello 35 cannons. I'll just call them Obice Modello 35s for short. These cannons had a caliber of 75 millimeters, muzzle velocity of 1,410 feet per second, maximum range of 5.9 miles, a traveling weight of 4,080 pounds, an elevation of negative 10 degrees to plus 45 degrees, which made them very beneficial in mountainous warfare, and a rate of fire of 12 to 14 RPM. When disassembled, they could be carried in up to 8 different pieces, which made them very versatile guns, especially in harsh terrain. You could just have 8 guys pack up these pieces and then assemble them on top of a mountain. Fighting in the mountains like this has an additional threat in terms of artillery, and that is that when a round impacts the surface, or if it just due to the rocky nature of the mountains, when a artillery shell impacts it, it's not exactly shrapnel, but rock blast, I suppose. I'm not even entirely sure what it's called, but shards of rocks from when the round impacts would scatter out and was extra devastating for both sides, Italian and Greek. Now, the Alpini artillery divisions had a very unique makeup, and they were very efficient at getting these guns onto the mountaintops. Now, the mountains in Greece are not as high as, say, the Alps, right? So World War I was kind of where they perfected the craft in that regard. But they were very efficient on getting the guns up. There's one instance where they were on Mount Chiarista, which is in Albania. And the guns could not get, due to the elevation, they could not get a very efficient line of fire on the Greek troops beneath them. So what they did was they pulled the guns up to the front lines. Now this is unique because if that front line were to collapse, they would lose all of their guns. The entire artillery regiment would be completely taken by the Greeks. But they were used so efficiently, so effectively, with infantry support basically right next to them, that they were able to use an indirect fire artillery, point it at the enemy, and just direct fire like a cannonball, shoot at them. So they were very innovative in that regard. Now, Italian explosives, this is part of the technological disadvantage they had as well. It was based on impact. Even their grenades, the Red Devil grenades. I actually have one here somewhere, over there. They, instead of like a regular grenade where you pull the pin, count to 5, throw, or, well, you don't want to count to 5, you want to count to 3, then throw it, and it goes boom. Italian grenades and projectiles and things like that were based on impact. So if you pull a pin on a grenade, it's armed, then you throw it, and then when it hits that hard surface, that's when it goes boom. Now, the problem is if you're in North Africa, where there's sand, or if you're in Russia, where there's snow, it's not going to go off. It'll just plop, drop right into the soft surface, and it will stay there. And then the British actually called them Red Devils, because a lot of times they acted as landmines. I don't know if that was intentional or unintentional, but it was an effect of it, where advancing British troops, they would come upon a grenade and they wouldn't see it; it'd be buried in the ground. They'd step on it and it would explode. So that's the idea between Italian projectiles and explosives and things like that, and their artillery was no different. Following an agonizing retreat and fighting off several attempts by the Greek forces to overwhelm them, the Julia took up defensive positions on Mount Kiarista, guarding the all-important Klysura Pass. From December 7th through December 21st, the Julia held firm and fought off several Greek assaults, but suffered additional casualties which further dwindled their ranks. Begging for reinforcements in an untenable situation, the Alpini were promised assistance, which came too late. On January 6, 1941, the Greek Second Army Corps launched an offensive with the 1st and 11th Divisions targeting the ragged Julia's defenses as the main focus of their attack. The weak line, manned by the thinned Julia, finally broke, and whatever stragglers who made it out withdrew 6 kilometers before linking up with their reinforcements, the Lupi di Toscana Division. The Julia then assisted in attempting to recapture the pass, however, all attempts were thwarted by strong Greek resistance. In this final phase of their disastrous campaign, the Julia lost 153 officers and 3,644 soldiers. The result was inevitable, but the tremendous Greek resolve, bravery, and tactical brilliance cannot be understated in this regard. The Greek forces also had many disadvantages they had to overcome. Most notably, their logistical situation had increasingly worsened as they pushed further into Albania. This is a picture of the Klysura Pass, and you can see how difficult terrain it is to attack. From an initial strength of 17,460 men, the division suffered an overall total of 9,317 casualties, around 54% total loss. If there's anything to take away from this video, it's that while the Italian offensive into Greece was an absolute disaster, and that the Greek counterattacks cannot be understated for their brilliance and bravery, their opponents, the men of the Italian Alpini, were no pushovers either. A new glorious Julia division was rebuilt like a phoenix rising from the ashes. This new 16,000-man strong division was deployed on a new campaign to defend the Don River on the Russian front. They faced the brunt of Operation Little Saturn and were annihilated. Again. Thanks for watching!